Thank you. Perfect. Okay, Vicky?
All right, almost ready.
And of course, you can ignore the cameras completely. Just have a conversation with Tom.
Right.
Okay.
Ready.
We're set.
Well, Otis, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And it's, of course, a pleasure for me because I had the pleasure of being in your class when I was 19 years old and teaching learning minority groups. And it started me off on an interesting journey.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are really straightforward questions. And when you answer, if you would answer in a complete sentence, that would be helpful. So if you could tell us your full name and also spell your full name, please.
My name is Otis S. Johnson. OTISSJOHNSON. The S stands for Samuel.
And Dr. Johnson, do you have a preferred pronoun?
And whatever you call me, just be respectful.
That's great. Thank you.
Best answer yet.
Yes. I would like to ask you if you would tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you were born here in Savannah, and kind of what that looked like, and particularly if in your childhood there were moments of that involved the church and that would connect to sort of your faith life as a child, but just in general, life as a child here in Savannah for you.
Okay. I was born in the Georgia Infirmary Hospital in 1942. I was the son of Otis Johnson and Lillian Brown Johnson Spencer. When I left the hospital, I came to the home of my grandparents, Paul Lawrence Brown and Lillian Brown. They were my mother's parents. My grandmother on my father's side lived at 1220 Love Street in the West Savannah area. I lived at 823 Rockefeller Street on the east side. When I was a year and 7 months old, my father died of tuberculosis, and my brother Paul Lawrence Johnson was 3 days old when my father died. So my mother was living with her parents, and I grew up in that household. It was a real church-going household. My grandfather was the chairman of the deacon board, and he taught the Bible class in Sunday school. He was the president of the Baptist Training Union. So we were in Sunday school in the morning and the BTU in the evening, because in those days you had 2 services a day. You had the morning service, and then you had the evening service. You had morning Sunday school, the morning church service, 11 o'clock. Then you had the evening Baptist Training Union at 7 o'clock, and then a service after the BTU. My grandmother was the treasurer of the senior mission. She was the director of the junior mission. So you can imagine I was in church a lot. My grandfather, as the chairman of the deacon board, had been instrumental in calling the pastor of the Central, now Missionary Baptist Church in what is now the View at Oglethorpe, which was before then the Hitch Village, and before then it was a part of the old fort. We walked from Rockefeller Street, where we lived, down Wheaton Street, until we got to Randolph, then Randolph down to what became Hitch Drive, and the red brick church is right there. It's being restored now because they had a fire last summer and it destroyed the building, but it's being renovated and restored. My grandfather, as the chairman of the deacon board, had the opportunity to select a new pastor. And he selected the Reverend William Daniels, who then not only was the pastor of the church we attended, he became my godfather. So I was I was really wrapped into the church. So we had Easter programs where you learn your little Easter speech. You know, you had a new outfit and you walked up and salute and say your speech. And for almost a month, we had practice in the afternoons after school to make sure we had that speech memorized and we could deliver it with vim and vigor. Oh, man. Then we had church picnics and other activities. So that is my early beginnings in the church. And so I am still a member of the Central Missionary Baptist Church. I can't say that I'm a very active member, but I keep my membership because there's no need for me to be dancing all over the city, joining church to church like some people do. So, you know, I go when I feel the Spirit.
Oh, my gracious. Well, help me then. So you are a young man here in Savannah.
Yeah.
And you're going through school, and again, I'm just going to kind of use my own experience with you. So I meet you when you're at Armstrong College, right? But help me a little bit with how you got from being in church all the time to being in that classroom at Armstrong, if you would.
I attended the Paulson Street Elementary School, started at age 6, and we had elementary school from grades 1 through 7, junior high 8 and 9, and high school 10 through 12. After attending Paulson, the next school I could attend, because all of the schools were segregated, was the Kyler Junior High School, which was located where the EOA office and complex is now on Ogeechee Road and Anderson Street. The Kyler used to run into that. So I went to the Kyler Junior High School, and after 1 year there, they shifted back to Paulson because they had built, by the time I got to Kyler, they were building the Robert W. Spencer Elementary School to replace my old elementary school. So my ninth grade year, I attended junior high at the Paulson Street School. Then I went to Beach for 10th and 11th and 12th grade, and I graduated from Beach in 1960. I then went into the Navy after joining the Naval Reserve in my 11th grade year because I couldn't wait to get into the military. In those days, black folks, black boys had a choice. The first choice was to go to college. That was out because of financial reasons. The second was to get a job, and at that time with just a high school education, and I was skinny, I wasn't muscular, so I wasn't going to get any kind of decent job. So the third option was the military. Either you go in the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. Because my father had been in the Air Force, in the Navy, and I'd heard so much about him, and then I had an uncle that was in the Navy, and he took a lot of time with us, and he would come by on the weekends and pick Paul and I up and ride us around, and he would, tell us, those Navy stories, and so I said, well, this is it for me, because in my mind at that time, thinking about a career, I could spend 20 years in the Navy because I was going to be 18 when I graduated. I'd be 38 years old. I'd be old enough to retire. I could get another job, and then, when my retirement came around, I would be financially stable. A long time ago in my youth, I had made a vow that I wasn't going to be in poverty. I was going to do something where I wouldn't have to be poor, because it was a struggle for my grandparents who were up in age, and they were trying to raise two boys, and we had to work with no question. And work in those days wasn't seen as something that you should avoid. It was something you wanted to do because you knew you needed money to do things that other people were doing. So my first job was at a shoe store. Not a shoe store, but a shoe repair shop, which was on Greenwich Street between Harmon and Paulson. And it was our job in the afternoon after school to go to the shop, and on the weekends, people would call the shoe repair shop and say, I got a pair of shoes, I need a half sole, I need a heel, the stitching is broken. We'd go to the house, pick up the shoes, take them back. Shoe repair man would repair the shoes. We would take it back. We would collect the money, and then they would give us a nickel, a dime, or whatever. But man, that nickel and dime, and when we got a quarter, oh man, that was great. Because a quarter was a trip to the East Side Theater on the weekends, because we could spend, I think it was either 10 or 15 cents for admission, and a bag of popcorn was $5, and a drink was $5. That was 50. That was 25 cents. So, we didn't have to ask grandmama or granddaddy for any money because we were getting enough to have some fun on the weekends.
Yeah, money was freedom.
Hey, man, you better believe it. So that was my first job, walking to the homes in the area, picking up shoes, bringing them back. Then the next job was an evening paper route or route, whichever one is correct. We had to deliver the papers in the neighborhood. And that was the first time I worked for a white person, for a white man. And he was a nice man. He was just a good human being. And he treated us with respect. And in those days, any adult got respect because our grandparents didn't play that stuff about sassing grown folk, So anyway, his name was Patrick. I can't think of his first name now, but he was a good guy. So that was the second job. The third job, and all of this was helping underwrite the cost of living. The third job was at the Crumley's Rexall drugstore on the corner of Waters and 31st Street. The pharmacist and the manager of the drugstore was Charles Waldrop. He was another guy that was a good human being. You I've run into some people who weren't so human, so especially when I was in the Navy. Anyway, I won't get into that. But that was the third job that took me through high school. We was able to get a bicycle, and in those days, our grandparents could buy things on time, on credit. It was really credit. Either you laid things away, like our Easter clothes and Christmas stuff, and you paid a little every week or every month until you paid it off, then you could bring it home. Or if you had, and I don't know if they had credit agencies in those days or not, but if you had credit, a good credit and if you had a reference, especially by a white person, if they would vouch for you, then you could get credit and not layaway. Well, because you took the stuff home if you could get credit. So we had the bicycles that we used on the press route and on the delivery for the drugstore. At the drugstore, again, in the day, there were some physicians that were still making house calls, or people went to the physician's office and came home with prescriptions. So it was our job to go and pick up the prescription, bring it back to the pharmacy. They would fill the prescription. They would also, any goods in the store, you could put them in there, or either people called the store and said, I need a pint of ice cream, and I want 2 Hershey bars, and I want, a bottle of aspirin, whatever it was in the store, they could order it, we would take it. And so that was a good job. That guy was really nice. And I think both Paul and I enjoyed working for him. After I came back from the Navy, I would see him from time to time, and he would always ask me, how are you doing? And my reply was, I'm doing all right. After I went to, started at Savannah State, the college, and then went on to Armstrong, I would see him and he would ask me, how are you doing? Anywhere we met, he would always ask me, how am I doing? And I was able to respond to him, I'm doing all right. And it seemed to please him because he knew he had played a role
Absolutely, yes.
in my life by having me have that little job. I think we were earning, I can't remember whether it was 29 or 35 cents an hour or something like that. And so we would go to work at 5 o'clock and, maybe 6 o'clock, and the store closed, I believe, at 10. So those little hours accumulated, and at the end of the week, we had a little money. I could go downtown, which was basically Broughton Street, or either West Broad Street, where they had apparel stores and stuff like that. I could buy, little pants and shoes and stuff like that. That really took a load off of my grandparents, and they could still, with their little income, buy us food, and then we could buy food, and we were more than a big liability. We were a small asset in helping them do what they chose to do. Because after my father died and my mother got married again and moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, there was no third income coming in because my grandmother did not work, and it was just on my grandfather and what we could provide, and they did the best they could.
Let me ask. I know a little bit about your story because you were you loved at Beach, you played in the band.
Oh man, that was heaven.
And the band was heaven.
Oh,
and
man.
You went to to Savannah State.
Yeah,
And had imagined yourself as the band director.
yeah,
And the civil rights movement came in
That's
view,
it.
if you will.
that's
and,
it.
And all of a sudden, you're on a different racetrack. as it
No
were.
doubt about it. Changed my life completely.
And-
But I still love the music.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
And
buddy.
that's yes, sir. And I know that you have a wonderful jazz collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your brother Paul, great musician.
Yes.
Very musical.
He graduated from Savannah State with a major in music
I
education.
didn't know that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Let me. I'm just curious. Your involvement in the civil rights movement here is, I don't think it's inappropriate to say legendary, and it is legendary. I'm curious, as you look back at that era, how do you remember like the role of the church in the civil rights movement, particularly locally? I mean, we could certainly talk about Dr. King at that level. But let's start, if we could, like locally. What was all that? How civil rights movement, faith-based community here? Just take us back there.
In 1939, if I'm right, it was either 38 or 39, the Reverend Ralph Mark Gilbert was called to pastor the First African Baptist Church. In Savannah, the black community was one of the early chapters, branches they're called, of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. I don't recall right now what year that was, but over the time between the founding of that branch and around 1938, 39, the branch had lost its charter because of underpopulation in terms of, because it's a membership organization, and I believe that you had to have so many members to maintain your charter and maintain your branch. When Dr. Gilbert came to town, he found a defunct NAACP, and he set out to rejuvenate it, and he did. He went, he was charismatic, as I understand, and he was able to go out and recruit people to join, because being a member of the NAACP in the 40s was not a cup of tea. There were risks involved if you were identified as being a member of the NAACP, according to whether the employer was a racist or was he a different kind of human being, would be determined whether or not if they found out that you were a member of the NAACP. In those days, was seen as some subversive communist group. But anyway, it wasn't. It never was, and it still isn't. And so he was able to expand dramatically the membership. He also created what became the largest NAACP youth council in the country. That is where W.W. Law comes on the scene as a youth member of the NAACP Youth Council. Dr. Gilbert then and his wife start traveling all over the state, organizing branches of the NAACP, eventually having enough branches to create the Georgia NAACP chapter. Law continues to be a mentee of Dr. Gilbert. And then he goes off to the military in World War II. He comes back. He earns a degree in biology at Savannah State, which was Georgia State College at that time, and becomes the president of the branch after Dr. Gilbert leaves. And he stays there for 26 years as the president of the Savannah branch of the NAACP. In all of that time, the NAACP and the Tribune were the advocates to right many of the wrongs that people identified during that period. Fighting for decent schools, fighting for equal pay for teachers, fighting to be able to register and vote. All of those things were on the agenda for the NAACP. And being a minister, he was able to recruit other ministers because the black church has a long tradition of having leadership on secular issues from the clergy. One thing that helps that occur is the fact that many of these ministers were totally supported by their congregations. They didn't work for any white folks, so they couldn't be threatened with that kind of sanction for their activity. So there was a big network of churches that were connected to the NAACP and supported their efforts and helped them to recruit members for membership in the NAACP. In 1960, the Savannah branch decides that they're going to join other youth councils around the South. And so they begin planning the initial sit-ins and other direct actions that started on March the 16th, 1960, with the sit-in at the Azalea Room of the Levy's department store on Broughton Street and the arrest of 3 members of the NAACP, 2 of which were members of my homeroom class, Carolyn Quillen and Joan Tyson. So we had the spirit, man. We were all. I was not a member of the NAACP because they met all the way on the other side of town, and my grandparents didn't want us traveling across town like that, especially at night, because it wasn't safe. Especially once the sit-in started and people started acting out all kind of crazy ways. So there was 1 student from Savannah State and 2 from Beach that were arrested. And we decided that we would go down to the police court hearings, which was held at the police barracks, which is still located on Havisham and Oglethorpe. And we left school to support our colleagues, and we went to the hearing. Of course, they were convicted. And then we came back to school, and we were met with the principal, Arthur Douglas, who told us that we were expelled because we had left school without permission, and we had to bring our parents if we were going to be readmitted. And this is my senior year, man. I'm getting ready to graduate, and I'm getting ready to go to the Navy. I'm on my way. So, Lord, I had to go home and tell my granddaddy that I had been suspended from school and that he would have to come with me. And so we rode the city bus because we didn't have a car. We rode the city bus, and at that time, the bus stopped on 45th and West Broad, which is now M.L. King, and we had to walk all the way down to Hopkins Street where Beach High School was. So we made the trek. We went into Mr. Douglas's office, and we had this little ritual we had to go through. So I was first. Mr. Douglas, I apologize for leaving school without permission, and I promise if I get readmitted that I would never do anything like that again. And then my grandfather, he had his little role. So he said, Mr. Douglas, and I don't know if it's either his exact words, but it's the essence of it. You don't have to worry about Otis ever doing anything like that, because he's not going to do anything like that, because he's going to graduate and go on about his business. So then, of course, the ritual was complete, and it was complete after Mr. Douglas said, well, Otis, you know better, and you shouldn't do anything like this again. You can come back to school. Whew. Oh, man. So then my grandfather makes his way on back home, and I didn't get a whipping. That said something to me, because to violate any rule of the school or to disrespect any adult earned a whipping. So I was pretty good. I only got a few because my grandmother did what I would call a spanking. But if you did something really bad, whoa, it was granddaddy's belt that came off and you got a whipping.
Was your granddaddy connected, ministerially, was he connected to the NAACP?
No. I can't remember him being a member of the NAACP. But our pastor was. And once the Sunday meetings got underway, church to church every Sunday, we had the NAACP come to our church. And it was, they had a list of churches. And every Sunday, beginning after that initial sit-in on the 16th of March, 1960, they would hold Sunday mass meetings. And the community would come, and the host church would have their choir there, and they would sing. And then you would get the news of the week, primarily from WW. And he would tell you what happened, and then you had other people like Eugene Gaston, Attorney Eugene Gaston would be there, Curtis Cooper would be there, Mercedes, and we call her Mercedes, not Mercedes, Mercedes Wright would be there, Esther Garrison, who was the secretary of the branch, would be there. All of these people would be there, and they'd have a little role, and that would be the report for the week.
So really, this is hand in glove. I mean, church movement.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was a hand in glove thing over a period of years. It sounds like
a period of years, because much of the finance for the work of the branch was coming from these churches. Every Sunday they took up a collection at the mass meeting. All of that money would go to the branch to support their work.
Were there sympathetic white churches, or were there well, I'll leave it at that. Were there sympathetic white churches?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
How'd that work?
There were sympathetic Episcopalian. It was interesting. Never had any Baptist church, never white Baptist. We had a few sympathetic Episcopalian and Presbyterian churches. And of course, the Unitarian Universalists were right in there and provided support both financially and I guess I'm not going to search for the right word, but spiritually. I mean, they allowed you to know that they were in support of what was going down.
They were allies.
Allies.
Yes, they were allies. They made it clear we were with you here.
That's right.
We have your back, whatever that might mean.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, that wasn't everybody, but there were certain, I call them courageous ministers and lay leaders who found ways to let it be known that they supported the movement.
I think about
And eventually, the local Catholic diocese, through their leader, and I can't think of his name, but he played a very important role in trying to pull the white and black community together to resolve the issue of the boycott. The economic boycott, which started in March, I believe, or either April of 1960, went on for almost 3 years, and it was breaking the back of the businesses downtown because we were just refusing to participate where you could not work as a clerk or cashier, where you couldn't get a credit card, or in some instances you couldn't even try on clothes. And so the word was, hey, Easter's coming, and we ain't gonna buy anything new for Easter.
Easter's coming, but we're not.
We're not. That's right. And then a kind of it's interesting. It's interesting that there was a kind of spillover to West Broad Street where you had Yakums and Yakums, and Robbins' department store on Park Avenue and M.L. King, Yakums burned down suspiciously. And then they wanted to blame the protesters on burning that. I don't believe it for a minute, because the Firestone place on Broughton, where Broughton runs into M.L. King, that burned down mysteriously, and I don't believe that was burned by black people. But anyway, Yakums just went on and didn't build back. Firestone built back. I like to say Yakums took the money and ran. They said, things are changing. We're not changing. We gonna get this money. And I don't know what happened to that family, because there were a lot of Jewish businesses that catered to blacks, and I just don't know the end story to what happened there. But yeah.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned Jewish, I think about Aaron Bushbaum.
Oh, man.
Let's talk about the role that he played.
Oh, he was the counselor behind the scenes, and sometimes not so behind the scenes, because he was friends with Eugene Gaston, who was an African-American attorney, and I think he got a lot of good advice from Aaron Bushbaum, who I considered, as I grew older, a friend. He and Robert Patterson, I lift them up, along with, not as close and not as intimate, but I lift them up with Patrick and Waldrop in my early days of working with white people who were decent.
And Bob would have been connected to the Unitarian.
That's
Church,
correct.
And Aaron obviously in the Jewish community.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I should have included the Jewish community when I was listing the Episcopalians and the rest of them. The Catholics have played an interesting role. The Archbishop played a role in bringing a resolution to the boycotts and the picketing and stuff like that. But rather than desegregate their schools, they closed all of the black parish schools, including St. Mary's, St. Benedict's, St. Anthony's, and the Pius High School that served the Catholic community, black Catholic community. All of those were closed rather than desegregated. That's an interesting thing that I don't hear a lot of folk raise. But they made that choice. And so then the blacks who were matriculating in Catholic schools then went to the white schools. But since I'm talking about faith and all like that, I had to add that in because it's a fact.
Is the group that you were talking about, when I say I remember this, I'm remembering hearing this. There was Mayor McLean set up called the Committee of 100.
I believe it was called the Committee of 100.
And the idea was 50 people from one side of the racial divide, 50 people from the other side.
I don't know how divided it was, but I think that was the title given to the group with the intent, I think, to have an equal representation. And the Archbishop sort of acted as a chair, the neutral chair of that group, and did a fine job of, I guess I call him a moderator or some other good term, to describe him. But he did a good job.
And the idea, if again, just my memory, which is based on story, was they would say, now we're going to talk to the theater owners.
That's where it started, because they had agreed to desegregate the theaters, and because of the white backlash, they reneged on that. And so the boycotts and the picketing resumed. And the economic boycott was still on. And the white community said, hey, now this is hurting us in the pocketbook. And if we're smart, we'll just go ahead and end this stuff, because you could feel it in the country. Things were changing. 1963 was the March on Washington. The agreement was made, if my memory is right, after the March on Washington. They could feel it. Plus, they were losing those dollars, man, and green talks, okay, and it trumps blacks and whites. So they said, well, we're going to go ahead and, because in the end, we're going to still be in control. That's why segregation and racism was so dumb to begin with, because they didn't lose any control of anything. But it was just the thing about, hey, this is the law, before the '64 Civil Rights Act. And Savannah ended that kind of craziness before the '64 Civil Rights Act was passed. We could vote before the '65 Voting Rights Act was passed. Now, it took us a little longer to deal with the housing issue. But Savannah can look with pride on the fact that, look, we did the community did the same thing when Sherman was coming. They went out there and said, hey, Sherman, You can have Savannah, just don't burn us down. And Sherman didn't burn us down. So the leadership in Savannah has been smart for a long time in terms of how it finagles this thing around race and other kinds of things. They said, well, no, we won't fight you overtly, but we got a plan that we're not giving up anything, but we just not going to be like Bull Connor and those nuts in Birmingham or in Montgomery or in St. Augustine or in Albany. No, Savannah leadership was smarter than that. And I attribute Malcolm McLean, Don Mendoza, Blackburn, what's Blackburn's first name? Jimmy Blackburn. All of those people were instrumental in holding the crazy folk down in line and not letting them get out of hand.
So if I sort of play this backwards a little bit, as you talked about it, the boycott really put the pressure on the business community.
Absolutely.
And then the business community, if you will, that pressure then opened up the opportunity for legitimate negotiation.
That's right.
Okay, but if you drop back a step, you wouldn't have gotten to the boycott without the NAACP.
That's correct.
And you wouldn't have gotten to the NAACP without the churches.
Without the churches. Plus, you can't leave out the Chatham County Crusade for Voters, because Jose Williams was a part of the NAACP. He had been designated the chair of a voter registration movement. And his job was to go out and register voters and to build the political arm of the movement. But in my opinion, and I believe it's in the opinion of a lot of people who studied this period, that he and Mr. Law had a clash of personalities. And so the opportunity for Jose to affiliate with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, what was founded by Dr. King and Joseph Lowry and the others, he spun off and created a different organization called the Chatham County Crusade for Voters as a separate group under the SCLC umbrella, while the NAACP remained under that umbrella.
Let me ask this. If Ralph Mark Gilbert had not come to Savannah, would Savannah be a significantly different town?
I believe it would, because somebody would have emerged. Because when you look at that period, they had several organizations that were advocating for what we would, under an umbrella, call civil rights. But there were several organizations, and out of those groups, someone would have emerged. But it was fortuitous that it was a minister, I think.
That's what I was trying to get at. That it was fortuitous. It was a minister that turned out in a way to be the spark or the spark plug.
Absolutely. Well, because of the nature of black people and their attachment to religion, and to have people capable of talking that talk in biblical terms, man, that's powerful stuff. That's the genius and the beauty of King. See, he could talk about right and wrong, not just in a secular way, but this is sin, you know, and these are the children of Moses who took them out of slavery. They wrapped all of that stuff up. Oh man, black preachers, woo. You talking about people who have a gift, and they can take something that would just be mundane to me, and they could find some scriptures and wrap it around and say, this is evil. And Christians must fight evil. This is the devil's work. Oh man, they could do it a dozen different ways. Because they preach through the Bible all the time, and a lot of times those sermons with the same scripture are very different, given what is happening at the time, giving what the history is, giving what the minister is feeling, what he's been dealing with. Oh, it's genius, man.
Well, that carries
Woo.
into, you mentioned you consider yourself a Matthew 25 Christian.
That's right. I'm a Matthew 25 Christian.
Tell us about that.
In the chapter of Matthew, the 25th chapter, beginning at the 31st verse and going through the 46th verse, Jesus is sitting at the time of reckoning. He's sitting there on his throne, and he says, the people can be divided like sheep and goats. And the sheep will be on my right side, and the goats will be, see, I'm preaching now. And the goats will be on the left side. And he said, and they're gonna ask him, well, what is this about the sheep and the goats? And then he goes into this business about, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was without shelter and you gave me shelter. And he goes through this list of things that if you are a real follower, you will do. But he puts it in a personal way. I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. And he goes down the list. And then they said, well, we haven't done all of these things to you. And then he says, well, if you have done it to the least of mine, you have done it to me. And those on the left-hand side who has done none of that, they ain't coming to heaven with me because they haven't done the right thing. So I don't worry about going to heaven because I'm trying to work my way there, not talk and sing my way there. And my work will speak for me. And there's a spiritual about let my work speak for me. So if I'm going, and I don't know, because everyone is judged, but if that's the criteria, I'm going to be on pretty good grounds.
You might get a suite.
Ooh, that would be nice, especially with all that milk and honey up there and all that stuff. Now that part I don't go to because that's a way that helps people who are struggling and really suffering here on earth to really have something to look forward to, and their faith is supposed to carry them there. But if they don't do the work, they still won't get there. So that's why I said I'm a Matthew 25 Christian. I have respect for all faiths, and I try to have a respect for all human beings, no matter what gender, what persuasion, whatever it is. that sort of divides us up. I ain't into all of that. If you're human and you do unto me as you want me to do unto you, we are all right. So that's my sermon for today.
Well, I think we'll take it.
So, amen. And can I get an amen?
I was gonna say, and I'm getting ready to say, the church would say, amen.
Amen. Can
All
I
right.
get an amen?
That's great.
But that's the core of my faith and my belief.
And to your point, expressed through your work.
That's
Decade by decade.
Yes, sir.
By decade.
Yes, sir.
By decade.
Even in my old age, I'm still trying to do the work.
You come out, I mean, at 80,
82.
82, excuse me, you show up
Yeah.
and you show strong, and it's, for someone who's 72, it's seriously, I mean, it's good to look at.
Well,
It really is.
I feel that I've been blessed, and there's a saying that folks say, I've been blessed and highly favored. And Marion Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, said that service is the rent you pay for living. And I have had a good life. I've been blessed. I've had some health challenges, but I got over those. It wasn't time for me yet because I had more work to do. So I'm a happy camper,
Well, in
man.
your health challenge, you turned into healthy support.
Yeah.
and turned that into
Yeah.
something that's helped a lot of other people think more about all that. So I mean, it's
Well, see, that's what you're supposed to do.
I hear that. Let me check with the.
I would like to hear his take on the education question.
All right. Okay. So let me. This question is not intuitive to me, so I have to actually look at this one.
All right.
Other than that, I'm just kind of working on intuition.
Okay.
Would you have thoughts about why working across faith traditions and faith boundaries are important? And then what would you tell children about that? Why it's important to work across these sorts of boundaries?
I would tell young people to realize that there is something in the universe more powerful than you. I remember the scene in Roots where Kunta Kinte's father takes him at his birth and holds him up into the night sky and say, behold, something greater than you. And whether you are a Protestant, and we got over 100 Protestant denominations, they can't get it together. Whether you are a Catholic, and the Catholics got the Orthodox group, and they can't get it together. The Muslims got 3 or 4 different groups. They can't get it together. No matter the Hindu, all of them acknowledge a power greater than them. And they all have created this way of talking about that power in a way that is humanly understandable. Genesis you go to the traditional African countries and go to some of their cultural groups, they all have a creation story. All of them. The Muslims, the Hindus, all of them acknowledging this power greater than yourself. And what has happened is that in order to understand this power, we have personified it. Jesus is the Son of God, who God sent down to earth to proclaim his word. I mean, now we can understand it because Jesus could look like you. He could look like these men here. But he's human. Not only that, the story continues that he gave his only begotten son, who then gets crucified, proclaiming who is the greatest. Oh man. And you get the people out in the Nabi Desert in South Africa. They all got their creation story, which allows them to understand it because it's a mystery. You know, when they get into the mysticism and all like that, you know, it's a mystery. The thing that I deal with some people say, well, do you believe in Genesis or do you believe in evolution? I said, there ain't no struggle between the two. In God's time, the story says, you know, in a week, he created everything, including Adam and Eve. But in the time of the universe, one day could be 1 billion years. And so now you got the scientists saying it takes 1 billion years for light or 100,000 years for light to travel. That in God's time,
That could be 20 minutes.
that's 20 minutes.
20 minutes, we're done. Yeah, I get it. Oh,
So humans have created a way to understand the unexplainable. The other thing that helps me is the fact that the secular and the sacred over time, and time is millions of years, fused. And Lord, if we don't have an example of the evangelicals and Trump right now, fusing the secular and the sacred for the purpose of power. And if you look all the way back to the chiefs and the kings and all of that, they found a way to work together. The Catholic Church is a great example of the fusion of politics because it is very evident that there was collusion around the persecution of the Jews during the Holocaust. So I don't want to get into that because sometimes people get all upset when you kind of speak the truth. But in my understanding of the evolution of society, there was a fusion between the secular. How do we come to understand this power that has created all of this stuff? And you can imagine under the night sky, looking up at the Big Dipper and seeing the moon change through the phases. Oh, man, who is responsible for all of that? God. It becomes easier to understand. Then you get these people who claim to have this knowledge, and then you got this other powerful group that claims to have that knowledge, and they say, well, now let's get together and make sure that we can control these people.
And that's what you would tell young people.
Yeah, but it would have to be over time because I would be going up against their parents, and most parents are indoctrinating their children into something, even if it's atheism. So I wouldn't spring that on them because I didn't come to that overnight. It crystallized for me when I had a professor at Brandeis, and we were talking about social policy and how things come to be the way they are. Man, whoo! Oh, that was an eye-opener. And it answered so many questions that I had been wrestling with. You know, starting in my childhood, when I see, and I don't mean to be blasphemous about, when I see these people falling out in church and being possessed by the Spirit and all like that, I never felt that. So I can't relate to that. But if they do it, because I know in the African tradition of voodoo, spirit possession is supposed to take place, I'm not going to talk negatively about that. I just can say I never experienced it. But I see the power of it and how people use it. And then I see these charlatans with the prosperity gospel. You know, don't worry about heaven. Try to get rich on earth. Get this fur coat. Get this Mercedes. You know, get this mega mansion. Oh, then worry about going to heaven. No, I'm going to worry about going to heaven first.
Matthew 25.
Oh, man. It's been a good life, man. I've come to see a lot of things and understand some things. Because I've been wrestling with, you know, this Hindu and Muslim thing and the Christian thing, and the Christians can't get it together because of Catholics, and then you got the Episcopalians now can't get it together because of their division over gender issues. The Methodist Church is all split up. Man, please, I don't want to be bothered with that. There's bigger things.
Look up.
There's bigger things to deal with.
That. That's right.
Sure, that mundane stuff, man, you keep that away from me. I want to keep wrestling with the big issue. For example, why do we have a black hole? Why do we have black holes? Why do we have black holes?
It's 5:15. We can't get into black hole at 5:15. You know, it didn't go.
All right.
Here's what I'm thinking. All right, I'm 19, and you're doing minority groups.
Yeah.
I'm 72, and now you're teaching me theology.
Oh,
man.
Lord.
That's great.
Well, see, I say the last thing I'm going to learn is how to die. Until that time, I'm going to keep searching for more knowledge because I realize just how little I do know. And when I walk in a library, I am humbled by just the fact that I see all of this knowledge. And when I go to Google, and now I got to get up to AI, or what is it? Is it AI? Oh, Lord, I had trouble getting to Google. And now I got to go to AI. It's just so much, man.
Yeah, but let's remember, there's information, knowledge, and wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom is where you are.
Well, I'm searching for it.
Well, I'm just saying, if you go back to knowledge
Yeah.
or information, you're going down the stairs.
Yeah.
You've already come up the stairs
Yeah.
to wisdom in a lot of things.
Thank
That's
you.
the way I would look at it.
Thank you.
So stay calm.
Yeah. Well, it's you know, it's learning and then knowing what to do with what you learned and how to apply it, and then sharing it with others. To me, I feel driven to share because when I look at where I started and where I am now, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Hard won.
Well, I'll leave the other part too to something else. But I wasn't supposed to be here in this place, in this society. So whoever or whatever you call it had a plan,
Yeah.
and I'm simply carrying out that plan. And at this point, I'm happy with it, cause I like learning things, man. I'm always trying to learn something I don't know, and more about what I think I know, because you only know so little of what can be known about anything.
It's funny you were talking about this, because I've wondered, is this part of age? Because to your point, I have, in the past 6 months, I've just been stunned how many times I thought, I have no real idea about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Oh,
I just don't.
man.
I have no real idea about that.
Yeah.
And I'd have to really dive in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, that's why I get intimidated when I walk into a library. Gee, I look around and I look at a little section that I think I know something about, but then there's 100,000 other things with knowledge, and I don't know anything about it. I'm here talking about black holes. I don't know anything about black holes. I'm trying to find out something because it's a mystery,
Right.
and I would like to know, what's going on.
In my old age, when I'm trying to learn, seriously, it's the same thing. I've decided to really try to get much better at gardening and horticulture.
Oh.
Once you open the door,
Yeah.
you think, oh, this. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable what if you choose to.
Yeah.
What there is to learn
Yeah.
about that. So I mean, yes, yeah.
Especially the way they are improving fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. Now they got different kinds of corn and wheat that can resist certain kinds of. Oh, look, man, you would never know everything. So you just keep on digging.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's the easy bit. That's the good part, the digging part. Well, thank you
Hey,
for your
man,
time. This is great as always.
it's been a pleasure, man.
Good. No, yeah.
See, the problem with me is don't ask me something if you don't want to
No, I
get,
get- yeah.
I can't give the 10-second.
We're not asking.
Never,
for 10 cents, no.
when I was a politician, you get these things and they want to give a soundbite. No, I got to give some context, man, because I want you to know if I'm going to make a decision, I want you to know how I came to make that decision.
I'm sure the news director loved that.
Oh, you know they did.
I can't get a soundbite.
Yeah, that's what they would say. You got to make it shorter,
Yeah.
And they used to tease me. So, well, this is not a class. Make it short.
I want to tell one quick story about this. Dickie Mopper told me once when y'all were running for mayor against each other, right? One of the highest compliments he ever received. There was a question on a panel. He answered it, and when it came to you, he said, "I agree with Mr. Mopper." He, to this day,
Yeah.
he remembers that and considers that like in
Wow.
his political career one of the highest moments in his political career. When you just defer, said, "I agree with that."
Yeah.
Move on to the next guy.
I haven't seen him in
Right.
years, man.
He's your age, close, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in good health.
Good.
What he's done, that's just been to me beautiful. He is helped several people come into the real estate business who you might not expect to be in real estate business and become quite successful.
Good.
And from what I can tell, that's not an accident. He's at this point. He feels like that's the role he can play.
Yeah, he wants to leave a legacy.
That's right. And Melody Rodriguez would be the person I know who, after a divorce, she was in a tough spot and got a real estate license. And said, come in my shop, and
That's
he is-
good.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
a good
Well, see, he's working on his way.
in his own way. That's
He's
right.
working on his way, man.
That's
When
good.
you're helping people, you're earning your keep, man. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Now, with all of that, I don't know what y'all gonna do with all of that.
Yeah,
But